Thank you for taking the time to watch this introductory presentation on the ICON, non-invasive hemodynamic monitor brought to you by Cardiotronic Ozipka Medical. The ICON is the new frontier of advanced hemodynamic assessment, providing accurate beat-to-beat cardiac output and stroke volume measurements with indications of preload, contractility, and afterload in a completely non-invasive, easy-to-perform manner. In order to appreciate the value of the information the ICON can provide, let us take a step back and look at how hemodynamic assessments are traditionally performed. Typically, physicians have access to blood pressure, heart rate, certain labs, and clinical examination to guide management of their patients. As the diagram on this slide shows, traditional parameters do not paint a complete picture of the patient's hemodynamic state. It is very difficult to determine whether a patient would benefit from diuretics, volume, ionotropes, or vasopressors with traditional parameters, and this leads to trial and error therapies and potentially suboptimal care for the patient. With the ICON monitor, the user gets a complete picture of the patient's hemodynamics in a quick, non-invasive, and reliable manner. ICON parameters are shown in the blue boxes, with indications of preload, contractility, and afterload, along with continuous cardiac output and stroke volume measurements. Physicians have the ability to easily optimize their therapy and avoid trial and error medication. The ICON is extremely easy to use and to set up on a patient. You only need 4 sensors placed on the neck and chest as shown in the diagram. Once the sensors are in place and connected to the ICON via the patient cables, all the user must do is input the patient's height, weight, gender, and age, and then press the green measurement button. In less than 3 minutes, a complete hemodynamic assessment is available and can be printed in the form of a status report shown here. Let us go through the parameters to show you how you can use them to assess preload, contractility, and afterload. Preload can be assessed with cardiac output, stroke volume variation, or SVV, corrected flow time, or FTC, and thoracic fluid content, TFC. If cardiac output or stroke volume increase by more than 10% during a fluid challenge, then the patient may be fluid responsive. A reversible self-volume challenge called the passive leg raise test will be discussed in the next slide. Stroke volume variation is the variation of the stroke volume over the respiratory cycle. A high SVV, more than 15%, indicates the patient is fluid responsive. Flow time corrected is a normalized measurement of the left ventricle ejection time. The idea behind this parameter is that if the patient is low on fluid, they have a low flow time. If they have a lot of fluid, then they have a high flow time. Thoracic fluid content is the total amount of fluid in the patient's chest, both inter- and extravascular. This is a great parameter to trend the effectiveness of diuretics. Passive leg raising is an easy and reversible fluid challenge. While monitoring the patient with the ICON, take note of stroke volume while the patient's legs are horizontal, as shown in the picture on the left. Now raise the patient's legs as shown in the picture on the right, and observe the change in stroke volume. If stroke volume increases by more than 10%, then the patient is fluid responsive. If stroke volume does not increase by more than 10%, then the patient is not fluid responsive. The ICON monitor provides contractility indicators that can help physicians guide titration of inotropes and determine adequacy of cardiac function. Targeting a normal cardiac index or stroke index can be used to guide titration of drugs. Trending cardiac index or stroke index can be valuable in assessing the patient's response to therapy. The parameter ICON, not to be confused with the name of the monitor, is a measurement of contractility and tells you how strong the heart is contracting. Systemic vascular resistance, or SVR, is a common indicator for afterload, but is typically unavailable because an accurate cardiac output is required to calculate SVR. ICON can accept the patient's blood pressure measurements and calculate SVR and SVRI, allowing physicians to guide vasopressor therapy. The ICON is able to provide over 20 advanced hemodynamic parameters through only 4 sensors because of Cardiotronic's patented technology. The way it works is the ICON sends a little electrical signal through the body that is used to measure the volume, speed, and time of blood flow in the chest. It essentially works like an electrical Doppler. Instead of measuring sound wave propagation, the ICON measures electrical wave propagation. The ICON gets measurements of the velocity of aortic flow, the time of aortic flow, and uses a patient constant based on height and weight, instead of an assumed aortic diameter that is used in echo, to derive an accurate estimation of stroke volume.
Sensor placement is very important to the proper operation of the icon monitor, so let's discuss this in more detail. The diagrams here show the areas of the body where the sensors can be placed. Sensor A, colored in black, can be placed anywhere on the head or neck, as long as it is above sensor B and on the same side of the body. It is best if sensor A is placed around or near the carotid artery. Sensor B, colored in white, must be placed on the base of the neck, but can be moved posterior or anterior along that axis. Sensor C, colored in red, must be placed on the side of the chest at the level of the xiphoid process, but can be moved posterior or anterior along that axis. Sensor D, colored in green, can be placed anywhere on the side of the chest or thigh, as long as it's 5 centimeters below sensor C and on the same side of the body. On small children or neonates, it's best to place sensor D near the femoral artery.
The icon has been FDA cleared since 2008 and has been validated against all the gold standards of measuring cardiac output, including thermodilution, direct fic, transthoracic, and transesophageal echo, as the table on this slide shows. Many of the premier hospitals in the US and around the world use the icon monitor to provide better care to their patients. If you would like more information, please visit our website or explore this list of references. Feel free to contact Cardiotronic at the email address provided.
Thank you for listening to this presentation. Please contact your local representative if you have any questions.